All right, hello and welcome to the RTÉ Soccer Podcast. I am Raf Diallo. This is one of two podcasts we're recording today, so you're getting two for the price of one, which of course is free as well, so that's the price of zero. But it's a big week for the Ireland Women's, and I'll be joined by Rachel Graham and my colleague Anthony Pine to talk about the France and Netherlands games that are happening this week. They're all live on RTÉ, but right now I am joined by a midfield trio of Alan Cawley, Richie Towell, and then ghosting into space on Zoom is Paul Corry. I hope you're all keeping well.
All good, Raf.
Hi, Raf.
Good stuff. Now, you were all at Dalymount Park, bar I think Richie for obvious reasons.
Yeah,
and to know about that, you'll just have listened back to an episode from about a couple of weeks ago when you spoke very lovingly about the ground. But look, that was the scene of the Dublin derby, which Bohemians won 3-2 against Shamrock Rovers, and really probably should have been 3-0 in the end, bar they conceded a couple of goals late on. But I suppose Richie first, just on the dynamic of the game, because at the beginning Shamrock Rovers had a good bit of control, and then sort of, obviously Bows then come into it.
Yeah, strangely slow as well, because I think in seasons gone past, Bohemians have always been the team who kind of dominate possession in the Dublin derby against Shamrock Rovers. And I think especially in Dalymount, the games always start at such a frantic pace, and it was similar on Friday as well, but Rovers seemed to settle a little bit more quickly into the game. They had a little bit more control possession of the ball, which is unsurprising, especially at Dalymount. But I think it kind of led them into probably a false sense of security. And you're seeing then how Bohemians, how they pressed, how tenacious they were, and even when they won the ball back, how they broke with real pace and real creativity they did. So probably led them a little bit into a false security, and obviously they got punished for it.
Yeah, and Paul, I suppose one thing that was indicative once Bows got into the game was the quality of their passing and how they were punching through the lines. Dawson Devoy, the obvious one, and then there's Patrick Hickey from the back for the build up to the penalty, and then even later on there's a chance not long after that second goal goes in where Dale Rooney pings one inside off the line towards Ross Tierney. Doesn't result in a goal in the end, but it's just indicative that they had a game plan and they knew where the spaces were.
Yeah, the general play was really strong, Raf. I thought, the tempo and tenacity that they played with is something that I'm sure they'll be looking to replicate as the games come thick and fast over the coming weeks. I think just looking at Bows over the first couple of games, like the spine of the team is very strong. That centre-half partnership of Hickey and Todd has given them an aggression that probably they've been missing in the last couple of years. And I don't know if they brought Hickey in to play as a centre-half, because he played so many different positions at Galway, but that combination and that relationship between himself and Todd is working very well in the first couple of weeks. And they really didn't give the likes of Burke and Noonan too many chances over the course of 90 minutes. And then you can't speak highly enough of Dawson Devoy and his game and where it's at this moment in time. You're very right to point out for that first goal, the pass into Colin Whelan's feet is paid with such pace. And I love to see centre midfielders who receive the ball, they look forward and they play forward. And Dawson absolutely has that in his game. And it's not just, I guess, his technical ability on the ball. There was moments there where he was regaining possession. There was one or two instances with Graham Burke and Dylan Watts. His general strength and his ability to recoup possession is something that's really playing into Bowes' hands. And then the front sort of four, if you want to look at Tierney, Parsons, Rooney and Whelan, just brought creativity to the game. You get your usual sort of energy from Ross Tierney. And I thought Colin Whelan's overall centre-forward play was superb. The ability to hold up the play, the ball for Parsons, and then the cherry on top was just his penalty. I know it's probably a minor detail, but the goal continues his momentum, Raf. He's looking like a number 9 that you can build your game around. And Alan Reynolds and Bowes in general, we just be delighted with the performance on Friday night.
Yeah, Colin Whelan last season, he did score a hat-trick. I think it was against Waterford quite early on. Didn't kick on at that stage. He's obviously had a hat-trick already this season. He scores a penalty now in the derby. He's looking really strong. There's a real opportunity for him to kick on now. And, at a time when I think all the build-up had been about Douglas James Taylor and he was going to be the number 9 that Bowes were going to build around, and then Colin Whelan's putting his hand up.
Yeah, absolutely, Raf. He's been outstanding. He's had such a brilliant start to the season. I was at the game in Sligo where he got the hat-trick, and the one thing that struck me about his performances so far, especially coming off his injury background, is he looks so sharp and fit. I had him written off, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. I was mad about him when I saw him as a young player at UCD, thinking he was getting his move to England, but to suffer 2 cruciate ligament injuries, it's very, very difficult to come back from 1, never mind 2, Raf, but he's done it. And I hope he maintains this kind of form and this level of fitness, and that he can stay fit, because he's an exceptional talent. And for him to occupy the centre halves on his own that he was doing the other night, he was absolutely brilliant. And I suppose that's where Bohemians were able to build from. I'm glad Paul has outlined all the brilliance of Dawson Devoy. It means I don't have to, because everybody knows I'm mad about him. But the one thing I will say about Dawson, and certainly looking at his level of performance again the other night, for me, he was the best player on the pitch. He's been the best player against Sligo. He's carried the form since last season into this season. But it's out of possession. Everybody speaks about his technical ability, which is there for all to see. But out of possession, he's become so strong. His running power, his fitness levels, even the third goal, he's the one breaking from midfield late in the day. Especially you consider you're playing against the midfield of Shamrock Rovers, where normally you're doing a lot of chasing out of possession. So for him to cover the ground that he's doing, he's just an outstanding talent. And I think we have to get to the point, Raf, where everybody speaks about obviously the game here in the industry, and we need to get it to an industry level, and that with the likes of Shamrock Rovers maybe challenging on European kind of group stage level regularly. We had Shelbourne do it last year, Bohemians in Europe. Hopefully they can do something similar. That maybe 1 or 2 of our players should be in the reckoning for the national team. And for me right now at this moment in time, he's playing as well as anybody. Now the Czechia game is only 3 weeks away. I'm not sure he'll get in the squad for that, but certainly in terms of Nation League games, summer internationals as well, friendlies, he's playing at such a level that I think he should be in the conversation. We're not blessed with midfield talent either in that national team at the moment, and as I say, he's operating at such a level that I think he should be in the conversation. He's been outstanding, and not just with the ball, without the ball as well. He's become such a pivotal figure, almost like a leader for that club, not just the team. As I say, I'm mad about him.
Yeah, we might come back to that, because we have obviously the Ireland midfield chat, hopefully, if we have a bit of time later on, which will look at what the situation is going to Prague, because of course Josh Cullen's injury has made that a lot trickier for Heimir Hallgrimsson. But let's listen to Alan Reynolds, the Bows manager, and then also Stephen Bradley, a Shamrock Rovers counterpart, who was very consistent in his responses to John Kenny after the game at Dalewell Park.
Well, Alan, what an extraordinary game that was. You're cruising, fans are climbing from 4, and then they're looking for the final whistle. But I think in the overall scheme of things, you must be very happy to get all 3 points there.
Yeah, look, I mean, I'd say for 90 minutes we're very good. Done our work first half. In fairness, look, they're a good team to adapt and be at our best to beat them. I thought they didn't try and play out. They were more direct, which I felt they were going to be a different way for them playing. But I thought we were excellent. Got the grips with it, scored a good goal in the first half. And I suppose the disappointing one is we could be more clinical in the second half, and you could go and score a couple more. But then you look at the last 5 minutes and it's backs against the wall and you're under pressure.
Steve, what's your assessment of that game tonight?
Some of it was good, some of it not so good. Small moments went against us.
Yeah, 3 down. What was your thoughts about that?
Like I said, some of it was good, some of it not so good. Moments went against us, and that's this game. Small details.
Yeah, but it was a comprehensive score for them at that stage. I mean, must have been thoughts on the sidelines thinking, how come we're 3 down? Did the pattern go wrong? Did your setup go wrong?
No, like I said, small moments in these games change the momentum. I've played and managed enough of these games to understand that, and that's what happened to them.
Okay, but can you explain what you're saying about the small moments?
And the third goal, Adams in their box about to shoot and slips on the ball and make a defensive error and ends up in the back of our net. They're the small moments.
And that's the overall feeling about the game itself, yeah? You got a couple of late goals that they were clinging on towards the end, I suppose?
Yeah, Pete got a header right on the line. I think it's going in, actually. If that goes in, we obviously get a point, but look, it wasn't to be.
Was it small moments that made the difference? I'm not sure, Richie, but overall though, from your experience of sort of slow starts for Shamrock Rovers and then they sort of, gain momentum as the season goes on, I imagine he's not particularly panicking at this stage of the season.
Yeah, look, I think you can see straight away he's not happy with the result, first and foremost. I think there's a little element there of trying to protect the players as well. I'd say he's obviously after being in the dressing room, we can see how much the players are hurting after such a bad performance. But to say little moments, I don't agree with it. To come out and play with aggression, to come out and play with an energy, to come out and play with heart, which is what you need, and a bit of fight in a Dublin derby, they're not little moments in a game. And I don't think Shamrock Rovers showed any of that throughout the 90 minutes. They obviously got the 2 late goals that probably glossed over a little bit for them. I think if the game finishes 3-0, I think you would have seen a lot bigger of a reaction from Stephen Bradley.
Yeah, and they play Derry City next, which is obviously a huge game, but Derry City themselves have a few question marks, which makes this game coming up this weekend very, very intriguing. They obviously win 4-2 at Waterford, but they made life really hard for themselves. So I suppose the only thing you can't question about Derry at the moment, their character has been shining through in terms of picking up results, but it's still very much a work in progress.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose when you think of the turnover players that Derry have had, they've been so unconvincing so far, but yet they'll point to 7 points on the board. Now, everybody was speaking at the start of the season as potential title challengers. We all said that. And I still think, obviously, they'll very much be that. But when you think they've had 4 games at home now, Raf, and everybody was kind of pointing to the fact that potentially get 10 points, 12 points, get off to a really good start, make a statement. They've only picked up 7. The worry for me is the concession of goals as well. They've already conceded 6, very sloppy at the back. Going forward, obviously they've loads of talent and they'll create chances and score goals, and even looking at the highlights, despite the fact that they were 2 down, they were still well on top in the game and creating chances. And they have shown character and resilience, all those kind of traits you would want in a team as well to get themselves back in the game. But I would worry about them defensively. McLean and the lad that came in from Galway as well.
Slevin.
Yeah, Slevin, centre half. We pointed at the start of the season about 2 left-footed players playing. The optics of that for me never kind of looks right as well. Fleming is very much an attacking kind of player. There was a miscommunication with him and the goalkeeper for the first goal as well the other night. So they just haven't convinced defensively. But I suppose the positive side of that, Raf, is the fact that they have fought back in the games and got themselves points on the board. And that man again, Michael Duffy, everybody speaks about him and kind of we have debates about the best players, but Duffy has been the best player for years in the league. He's been absolutely unbelievable, and for him to kind of dig out a victory again for the United and the second goal that he scored, the only problem I have with that, again, it's those floodlights and the ball kind of when it flashes across that light, you can't see the ball until it lands on Mickey Duffy's chest, but then once he chests an unbelievable volley. And he's been such a great player, Michael Duffy, a mainstay, and regardless of the turnover of players, fellas going out the door, fellas coming in, he's been a mainstay of that team over the last 3 or 4 years, and he was doing the same with Richie's Dundalk team. Fantastic player, but certainly they've been very unconvincing in these 4 games so far, Derry City.
Yeah, Paul, I just want to emphasise that second goal that he does score on the night. It is unbelievably well taken, obviously with the flight of the ball taken down and the quick reaction as well.
Unbelievable, Raf. I mean, it's difficult enough to watch a ball as it travels 30, 40 yards. It's come over the defender's head, so he's probably seen it late at that point. And the chest control to just kill it dead onto your left foot is incredible. And then the connection off his weaker side. I know he's very comfortable with his left foot, but it's still his weaker side into the back of net was fantastic. And only for him, they wouldn't have the points tally that they do at the moment. And I guess if you're Tiernan Lynch and you're looking at that squad and the results that they've had, I would agree with Alan that there's probably elements to their game that you would be slightly worried about. The good news for them is that they're scoring goals. And Michael Duffy's contributing. Thomas has scored. You've got Clark and White at the top end of the pitch who can almost get you out of jail. And that is maybe something that Tiernan Lynch will take a little bit of hope from. But they got to iron out some of the mistakes that they're making at the back. They've conceded first in every single game that they've played this year. So if they could iron that out, you might see a little bit of progression in them. I still don't think the balance of the team is right with James McLean playing in the middle of the pitch. That's a very difficult thing to do, whereby you go from playing on the wing as a left back, left wing back, or an out and out winger, to then going into the middle of the park where your angles are just so completely different. That doesn't work for me. And he's got a little bit of a problem there because I've heard Alan mention before, like Fleming and Duffy are so strong down that left-hand side, he probably doesn't want to disrupt that. So Lynch needs to work it out. He needs to find something that balances that side a little bit more. But you can't praise Michael Duffy enough. Like, that goal was fantastic. Even the penalty, the confidence and swagger that he put it away with, and his overall game is just superb. You just hope he stays injury free, because he has had 1 or 2 niggles over the last couple of years. When he's come out of the side, it's really impacted Derry. So you just keep your fingers crossed that he can maintains that fitness and stars for Derry.
Yeah, and then Richie, I suppose, going into the game this weekend, this Friday, really, between Shamrock Rovers and Derry City, as Paul has outlined there, there's midfield issues for Derry in terms of how do you get the best out of James McLean, and now they're coming up against the best midfield in the country.
That's an argument in itself. They're best midfield in the country after playing against Bohemians on Friday night.
I'd throw Shelbourne. Shelbourne's midfield into that mix.
No, I get what you're saying.
Yeah,
Raf,
on paper, based on the history of it.
The only probably confidence they can probably take is that they beat them in the President's Cup a couple of weeks ago. I know Shamrock Rovers probably had a couple of players missing and probably rested a couple as well. It's going to be a great game. It's going to be really interesting to see how Derry approach the game. They've obviously had 4 home games now, which they haven't started great in any of them. I think if they start the games in the same fashion away from home, I don't think there's going to be any comeback from them. So it's going to be really, really interesting to see how Tiernan Lynch shapes up for that game, especially against the Shamrock Rovers team who are going to be really hurting off the back of a bad defeat against Bohemians. They're going to most definitely be coming out all guns blazing, and I'm sure Stephen Bradley and the lads have been working extremely hard this week on the training pitch. So yeah, look, Tiernan Lynch made some really good substitutions on Friday. A lot of the players we brought on had big impacts in the game. Will he change the formation? Will he change the shape? Will he bring the likes of Akinyemi in from the start? They're all big questions that he's going to have to answer.
Yeah, and obviously last week we spoke quite in depth about the Louth derby and the fallout obviously with the Flares now in terms of Drogheda United. The consequences are a 4-game away ban for their fans, 15k fine as well, and they will not attend any Oriel Park fixtures in this calendar year. The club has also pledged to cover the full cost of the damage caused to the pitch at Oriel Park. Now back to the pitch and back to their own pitch, they lost 2-1 at home to Shelbourne, but I suppose to begin things, Paul, the goal that Shells conceded with Andrew Quinn kind of running Forrest Gump style halfway along the pitch and then squaring it for Brandon Kavanagh, Shells will be very disappointed with that straight off a corner as well.
Yeah, I think that's the point. Managers will find it difficult to have a concession whereby you're in an attacking moment, you've got a set piece, like really you want to have your setup that you're not able to be countered. And in fairness to Quinn, like his ability to dribble and eat up so much ground was very impressive. And not only that, his pass to pick out Brandon Kavanagh was a very accurate one as well. So maybe you can hold your hands up and say it was a moment of brilliance from a Drogheda perspective, but don't be surprised if there's a slightly different setup for Joey O'Brien and Shells from set pieces this week to make sure that it doesn't happen for them. But Shells did well, Raf. I mean, they have got options, they've got players, they've got attacking players in particular that can come off the bench and make an impact. Thought Harry Wood took his penalty very well. Whether or not it's a penalty, I still can't make my mind up on it. I've watched it back a couple of times, and Dennison is slightly late, but is he so late that it's a penalty? I'm not too sure, so you can understand Kevin's frustration there. And set piece has been such a pivotal part of the game. Sam Bowen took his goal well. So it was important, I felt, for Joey and Shells to get off the mark. There's been a lot made of their recruitment and the strength and depth that they have in the squad versus, say, last year. But what you need to ensure is as you bed those players into your system and into the club is that you get 3 points on the board and don't allow a gap to open up between yourselves and Bows or Rovers. So irrespective of the performance, irrespective of how they got the 3 points, I just thought it was important that Shells got that win, and Joey take a lot of confidence from that.
Yeah, in the centre forward position, Alan, at the moment, Sean Boyd obviously started. He wins the penalty, and as Paul has outlined, it was a bit contentious, but he wins the penalty. At the start of the season, John Martin's started a couple of games. Meepo started the first game alongside John Martin, but they'll obviously have to settle with something. They've got good depth in the position, but what are your thoughts on that area?
Yeah, that was my one concern for them at the start of the season. I think they're well set up in all other areas of the pitch, and Sean obviously had the impact. The only problem with Sean is how many games are you going to get out of him a season, and can you rely on him being injury free? And what we've seen in the last 2 or 3 seasons, that's not the case. So one player though that came on, and Paul, I think to be fair to Joey O'Brien, like Richie speaks about the substitutions Tiernan Lynch made, and this is the beauty for the likes of those managers that have the big squads. You have options that are coming off the bench that can have a huge impact, where some of the smaller clubs maybe don't have that, and you're almost replacing like with like. So he brings on, and I was at the game in Talca last week, and the lad that brought in the Freitas, Rodrigo,
he done well when he went up.
Brilliant when he came on against Galway. It looks really sharp, and he came on the other night and went 2 up top, changed the formation and changed the game really. I think he changed the shape and brought Gannon on as well at the back. So yeah, that's the beauty that those managers have. But I think it was so important that they get the victory, and they've done well, Shell, so far. The game against Galway, I thought Galway played very well last week and probably deserved their point, but it was so important you get 3 points on the board, and 3 games in, 5 points. I think Joey O'Brien will take that for now. You're still trying to kind of bed a couple of new lads in as well, settle on that midfield. I know JJ was back involved the other night as well, JJ Lunny, but you've McEnroy, Jack Henry Francis, Harry Wood, Ali Coote put in the ball for the Sam Bone goal as well. So you have huge options there, trying to get them all into the team. But that's a good headache to have as a manager, Raf. So I think 3 games in, 5 points, I think Joey O'Brien will be happy with that. And as I say, the options that he has up front, I think you'll see a lot more of that boy that they brought in, because he was very, very good in the game against Galway and then coming on again the other night. And it could be something that they may look at. Like, we've seen a lot of Shells in the last couple of seasons where they've only gone with one up front, whether it be Boyd, Meepo on his own, or John Martin. The fact that he went with 2, and when you look at his physical profile, Rodrigo Freitas, he's small. I actually thought when they signed him, he might be another big strong boy. So it could be kind of a good
yin and yang
foil for the likes of Duffy, one of the big ones, taking the kind of the physical brunt of the attention, whereas then you have the other little creative lad, and he's not small by any means, but he's a bit smaller than Sean Boyd. So it might be something that we might see more of with Shelbourne as well, but they've a lot of options. They're my tip. I'm not changing just yet, Raf. I'm happy enough at the start.
All right, stick to your guns. Anyway, Pats as well, they had a very crucial win, 4-0 against Dundalk, and I had in my notes I'd written down just what the doctor ordered, but then when I was listening back to the commentary and I heard Johnny Mack actually using the same phrase after Zach Elbozetti put in the 3rd goal, I didn't feel as original, but then at the same time it's, great minds think alike, I suppose. But I suppose, Richie, just on Pats themselves, it is truly what the doctor ordered, because like Shells, they had that kind of winless start and there's a lot of question marks about them, and they needed 3 points and a really good performance with a load of goals as well. Yeah,
they needed that big time. I think they needed it more than any other team in the league. I always feel St. Pat's are a real confidence team. They are. That 4-0 win, and you see even the goal scorers, the likes of Romal Palmer, who that was his 4th game in a year, Raf, which is absolutely crazy. I know Stephen signed him and they had really, really big hopes from him, and he's been missing for a full year, which is crazy. They had Sean Hoare, who was another big signing from him. In my opinion, Sean Hoare is one of the best centre halves in the league. I think he's incredible. Athletically, he's really good. He's really good on the ball. So for him to get a goal, get a bit of confidence back in, is brilliant to see him back. Zach Elbozetti, he obviously got a goal. He's been injured quite a lot as well. I think he might have got another injury in the game as well. So he's been really hit with some injuries over the last 18 months or so. And then Aidan Keane as well. So there's 4 lads who St. Pat's missed for probably the majority of last season, and they've come in and all scored goals. So Stephen Kennedy be absolutely delighted. I know he was saying that it was a bit surreal playing against his own son, which is brilliant to see. But I think he'll be absolutely delighted with not just the win, the 3 points that they needed, but I think the manner and the fashion in they done it.
Yeah, and Paul, I know you need to shoot off very soon, but I just, I suppose on the midfield, before I let you go, the Pats midfield, there's often been talk, I think in recent seasons, about trying to get more support for Jamie Lennon in the centre of the park. Obviously the formation has changed now and it's gone to a back 3, so that dynamic, especially now with Romal Palmer coming back and I suppose capitalising on a Dundalk error on the day and scoring it, what's your sort of thoughts on that sort of engine room at the moment for Pats from what you've seen at the start of this season?
Yeah, it seems as if Lennon and Bagley are probably going to be the 2 that he's going to go with for the next couple of weeks, and then maybe you decide whether it's a Levy or a Forrester that plays in and amongst them and maybe plays a little bit closer to your front men. I think one question mark that I have around Pats, Raf, is there's plenty of talent and there's plenty of ability within that squad. Sometimes you look at them and you worry whether or not there's a little bit of a soft core or soft underbelly to some of their players. And when it gets really tough and games are really tight, maybe they're a little bit easy to play against. Now, I wouldn't label that at a Jamie Lennon in particular. He's been, steady and consistent in that squad for a number of years. But there's a couple of players just around him where you just wonder when the game's maybe not going quite as you might want or expect, they tend to go missing. And I think whichever 11 Stephen goes with, there has to be kind of a tenacity to them that they're not an easy team to play against and not an easy team to get at. So Lennon and Bagley probably give you that protection there. They're probably both more deep-lying midfielders that will sit in front of the likes of Redmond and Hoare. Maybe that gives you a little bit more protection. But what you don't want to happen is to lose maybe some of that creative flair that Stephen Kenny's sides have always played with. So he's trying to find that balance. The results and the goals will definitely help. And I'd agree with Richie that keeping the core players fit, your Sean Hoare, who's had a lot of injuries in the last couple of years. You hope that he stays fit. You need your Aidan Keenas and your Max Mattis at the top end of the pitch, and the energy of a Palmer certainly helps. So there's certainly signs of progression within that resulting performance against Dundalk, but it's a squad and it's a club at this moment in time that you want to see them kick on, but you don't get too excited or too caught up in, a once-off performance that maybe doesn't lead to a consistent set of results.
All right, well, good stuff, Paul, and I know you have to hurry off, so take care, and we'll chat soon. All right, and Richie, I suppose just on the Dundalk side of things as well, obviously they've had a reasonably solid start to the season. This is the first big hit they've had since the start of the campaign. I suppose what would Kieran Kilduff, take out of it? Because the first goal that they conceded was needless, to say the least.
I think, look, you see their fixtures that they've started with: Derry away, Shamrock Rovers away, St. Pat's away in their first 4 games. That's as hard as it's going to get. They obviously had a really good result up in the Brandywell. They had a great result in Tallaght Stadium while they were down to 10 men. So I think for them, that was their 3rd game in 7 days it was, and I think it really hurt them. I think missing Vinnie Leonard in the game, that really impacted them. I'm really concerned about their strength and depth in their squad. I think we're after seeing that already. As I said, that was their 3rd game in 7 days. The squad looked a little bit stretched, and when you're bringing lads in who probably can't get to the levels that the other lads can, that's when you get a performance like that. So I think for them it'll just be about how they bounce back from it. Obviously they're only a newly promoted team, so for them to get back on the horse and to get a good result this Friday, that'll be really, really important for them. I think Kieran's done an absolutely incredible job. I think the way he sets up his teams, normally they're a team that are really resilient at the back, and similar to a draw that they look for set players, for long throw-ins and stuff like that. So for them to concede 4 goals, Kieran will be absolutely devastated.
If anyone ever wondered, Raf, just in terms of the jump from the First Division to the Premier Division, this is a prime example, because if you play 3 games in a week like they had, and not only physically, emotionally as well, when you think back of the one last week against Drogheda, the Louth derby, all the kind of expectation, how much that would have taken out of the players, a huge kind of event in itself it's become. Then you go Monday night up to Tallaght, Shamrock Rovers, you go down to 10 men with the last 20 minutes chasing shadows again, maybe for long periods. You get your late goal again. There would have been a big adrenaline rush. Then you have to go again on the Friday night against Pats, who were desperate for a win themselves. And like we said about the likes of Joey O'Brien, the likes of Stephen Bradley, the likes of Tiernan Lynch, who have the options that can chop and change and replace like with like, you don't have that at Dundalk, Sligo Rovers and Waterford, and that's why you look at those 3 teams that we all predicted to be down near the bottom. They've all conceded. Dundalk have conceded 8 now. Waterford have conceded 7, and Sligo Rovers conceded 7. So it's no coincidence that you just don't have that depth of your squad and quality that can cater for kind of bulk loads like that.
Well, you see, Rovers made 8 changes for Dundalk could never do that. If they did, they would be on the end of another hammering, and that's where the concern was for me. I know Kieran, he signed good lads who know the league. They've been around the block, but I'm still really concerned about the depth of their squad. And
that's only natural, to be fair. Like as Rich said, he's done a great job, Kieran, obviously getting promoted. I mentioned a couple of weeks back just about how well he comes across himself in the interviews. He speaks quite well. He's very in tune with what's going on and his surroundings. But it will be a challenge. All year it's going to be a challenge. He will be under no illusions whatsoever. They've 3 points on the board. He will look to any positives that he can take. He mentioned in his interview that bar the one the other night, they've been competitive in all the games, that they're a match for anyone, I think was the quote that he used on their day, and that's what he will point to. So it's just, and believe me, if you were in the dressing room with him or in the staff room with them, the 3 games in 7 days for the likes of those clubs, the smaller ones, it's really tough going.
Yeah, and Galway United, who are playing tonight against St. Pat's, they won 1-0 against Sligo Rovers in the Connacht derby. I suppose just on the Galway United side of things first, there's obviously a stereotype of the way they play, but the Jimmy Keohane goal and the little 1-2s in the box, that itself kind of went against type in a certain sense. And then if you just want to chat about that, but also the other part being the red card for Carl McHugh on Axel Peasold as well. What your thoughts on that? Because that one was, it could be one that's that's fair enough, but then also could be quite harsh.
Yeah, just to go back to what you said about the goal, I think it was brilliant. I think Bulger does great.
Yeah,
Bulger travelled with the ball, and that's where probably we criticise Galway a little bit too much, where instead of having players like that can dribble the ball and take it from A to B in a transition, they normally go a little bit longer and a little bit more direct. But I think John Caulfield will be absolutely delighted. I know there was a lot of people actually probably looking at him as if, is he going to leave at the end of last season, and there was a lot of question marks about him. They had a great result against Shelbourne last week. They've backed that up with a 1-0 home win against Sligo. I just heard that was their first home win against Sligo since 2017, which is absolutely crazy to think that they'd be two teams on similar levels that more than likely would be fighting relegation. Again,
well, I suppose Galway weren't in the top division for a long time as well. Probably does
obviously, but it's still a scary stat to even think that last season alone that Galway didn't get a win against them with the form that Sligo were in. So I'm delighted for John, because I think he's a real football man. I think that was his 100th game in charge for Galway at the weekend as well. So it was absolutely brilliant to see. And as you said, Raf, the football for the first goal was absolutely brilliant. It was. And about the red card as well, I think it was a red card. Yeah, I do. I think in this day and age, I think if you go high with a tackle, I think that's you done, and he was a bit unfortunate with that. Yeah,
and then on the Sligo Rovers side of things, Alan, I know a club close to your heart, but last season I think I remember a point where you spoke about how bleak it was. The sun actually came out afterwards in summer, actually, coincidentally, and they finished relatively strongly. They just about hung on at the end. But where do you feel they're at this stage? Do you feel, well, again, we can't really tell the future, but do you feel there's enough in there that they will have that little bump in the middle of the campaign? Because obviously John Russell has form for, I suppose, being resilient in a certain sense.
Yeah, I mentioned that was last season, Raf, and it was bleak, and there was a lot of clouds around the club, and it was raining. At the moment it's raining, there's thunder and lightning, there's storms going off. It's the worst ever in terms of anything that you could predict, and the fans should be so worried, because we mentioned this as well, to be fair to John Russell, it's so hard that best players leaving. And even going back to it's been a bit of a theme throughout the show with the squads and the depth. And that's one thing if you have a strong squad, or if you have kind of the lack of depth in another squad. But when you have fellas going out the door and you're trying to sign fellas that are as good as the ones that are leaving, it's nigh on impossible at times to keep kind of doing that year after year. So, and the ones that have come in this year just haven't made any impact. I've seen them now a couple of times live as well. And the one thing that kind of carried them last year is that they were always a threat. Hakiki yelling that they might create a chance. They have no threat whatsoever at the moment, Raf. So if you're conceding at one end and you're not carrying a threat at the other, it's a recipe for what we all kind of envisage and fear at the moment, and that's what all the Sligo Rovers fans are fearing. And I feel for John Russell at the moment. You're 4 games in, you've only scored 1 goal, which was the opening night. Hakiki, they haven't scored in 3 now, haven't even looked like scoring in 3. Very little up top. The lad that's come in has had no impact. Rory Meekison, I mentioned his body language horrendous against Bohemians the night they were losing. When he came on as sub, he started the last couple, no impact. Cavan up front, no impact. He had no impact last year either, in my view. So I
know they went a little bit more direct against Galway as well.
Yeah, and funny, we're saying about and sometimes these stereotypes, I think you can label clubs wrongly. John Caulfield, I was watching Galway last week in Shelbourne, and they played some great football, and I have no problem with a team playing a pass down the line, bypassing the midfield, maybe for a winger or for a forward to get in behind and getting across into the box. That's not long ball, that's good clever play at times.
I think that's what Sligo need to do.
And maybe it might be something. Now, the one thing I suppose, if we are looking for a bit of sunshine for Sligo Rovers, and you're asking can it happen again, young McManus obviously is after coming back from Bowes. There was a bit, because I worried about their midfield options, so potentially, but it's just the forward areas that they're really, really struggling, Raf. So yeah, we mentioned at the start of the season about it being a long season. It's going to be a very long season, but I would also echo what Richie said about John Caulfield. His 100th game with Galway, he's been a brilliant servant to the league, both as a player and as a manager. Always carries himself really well, John. And I think, to be fair to him, people had doubts about the players that they lost, because they lost big players as well. He's after bringing in lads, and that I watched him, as I said, in Talca. I was very impressed with them, and they'll be fine this year, Galway. The ones now that have the major worries, Sligo Rovers, Dundalk and Waterford are the 3 that'll be down there. Yeah,
so it was 12 shots the Galway United had on and off target, and Sligo only 4. But I want to talk a bit about the internationals, particularly the midfield area. But before that, the FAI last Wednesday confirmed that the Republic of Ireland will host Israel at Aviva Stadium on 4th October, and said that they have no choice but to fulfil the Nations League fixtures, and that serious consequences would result from forfeiting the games, which would materially harm the long-term sporting interests of Irish football. So let's listen to the FAI CEO David Carrell, who was speaking to Tony O'Donoghue about this last week.
The choice we make is not dismissive of the situation that's unfolded in Gaza. It's our role as board and executive of the association to look at this through the prism of football. we are in these posts and in these positions to safeguard the future of Irish football. And in this situation, difficult as it is, the decision presented to us only has one viable option, which is to fulfil these games.
All right, and on top of that as well, there's a PFAI survey subsequent to that of 214 players, and 63% feel Ireland shouldn't fulfil the fixtures, and 66% wouldn't attend the home leg. The non-attendance, for those of who would not attend, 79% put that down to moral reasons, and 14% due to safety concerns. And I don't think this is going to be the last we're going to be hearing of this issue. Obviously, the games are not for a few more months, but before that, obviously, there's Prague and this road towards the World Cup, and I'm looking at the calendar, we're already into March, so everything moves quite quickly. But in the meantime, during say January, Josh Cullen picked up an injury, and that's really going to affect the Ireland dynamic in midfield. Now, he did miss the Armenia game towards the end of the group qualifying, but how do Ireland respond to this in terms of the options? Because he is the one sort of sitter who's a tidier, and a lot of the other options, if we're talking about Jason Knight, Jason Molumby, they're more dynamic, not exactly sitters.
No, and it's a problem for Heimir, obviously, because he's been a mainstay of Cullen. He obviously really likes him. You hear Scott Parker speaking about Cullen as well at Burnley, and speaks very highly of him. He's been a loss for them as well in the Premier League. So it's a problem that he's obviously trying to find a solution to. And I think Molumby, to be fair, played in that deep lying role. And I think it's about putting a bit more responsibility on Molumby, as you say. I felt in his younger age as he was the one that would tear around and a bit headless at times, but I think as he's gotten a bit older, maybe it's about obviously speaking to him in terms of letting his quite clearly the responsibility that he has in terms of just sitting in front of that kind of back 4 or 5, whatever the case may be, to give him that responsibility. I think he will obviously play, and I think Knight will be the one that'll probably go in alongside him. And again, you're talking about Jason and his energy, and you don't want to take from that, but I think once we have one sitting in there, if Knight is the one that goes alongside him, he's the one that would potentially maybe break forward with the likes of an Azaz, who I think would play in there. I think Alan Brown is doing really well at the moment.
He's been brilliant for Borough,
club level. Middlesbrough riding high in the Championship as well, so he may come into the reckoning. But again, as that sitting one, I don't see him as that. He's one that more kind of likes to get forward and be maybe a number 8 rather than number 6. So I think, as I said, and we spoke earlier in the show about the likes of that area and potentially Dawson Devoy and whatever, we're not blessed in that area, unfortunately, Raf. So that's a solution that Heimir and John O'Shea will obviously be. They would have known this for a long time as well, because Josh has been out a couple of months now, and we all knew it was going to be long term. So they would have been racking this in their head and who they can kind of come up with. So I'm sure they will have some sort of plan in place. But at the moment, the ones I see is probably Molumby and Knight.
Yeah, because there's an issue of depth and experience as well. So Conor Coventry would play that role, but the only thing, he's not actually playing as much with Charlton in the last few weeks. And then Boston Lowell, I think Stephen Kelly has talked him up and feels he has huge potential, but often out injured, and he's actually out injured at the moment. I'm not sure if he's going to be back in time for Prague, and on top of it, he seems to be playing full back for Stoke a fair bit, and often centre back, not really as consistently in centre mid, and that's a big issue in terms of the depth. Even if you do go for, say, Molumby, Knight, behind them, the options really aren't there. Yeah,
that's the big problem, isn't it? I think Ryan Manning could probably play in there. I played with Ryan Manning at Rotherham, and both of us played midfield together. Ryan's really, really good player. I think he's done really well when he played left back, Ryan Manning. And
he won't play him in the middle.
Yeah, but that's where he can play. But that's where we're at the moment, isn't it? We don't actually have too many options to play there. I think Alan Brown, he's another serious options that we have. Conor Coventry, as you said, but I think the two sitters will be Molumby and Knight, and then I think they will play Finn Azaz ahead of him.
That's what he'd probably have to do, in the sense that when you play Cullen and Molumby, Cullen is going to do that job anyway. He will just sit there, even if Molumby kind of breaks out from there. The worry you have when it's Molumby and Knight, are they disciplined enough, the two of them, to sit? Now, I think Molumby can do that, but I think you're going to get the protection from wide areas, and he'll end up maybe going with an Azaz or an attacking one and a forward. But I think you'll see kind of it'll end up being like, whether it's wing backs or kind of wingers tucking in narrow and getting protection kind of in numbers in that regard, being kind of quite narrow rather than us breaking out from there. So I just think it's just so unfortunate, but these are the things with international football. You go back to, obviously, when we qualified, everything was riding high. At the moment, Mikey Johnson got injured at the weekend as well. He's out now, it looks like. So it's all timing, Raf, and you could be in a really good place in September and a bad place in March. Obviously Evan as well, you would have been hoping Evan would have been fit. It looks like Evan's out now as well. So these are the things that an international manager has to deal with. But it takes me back to the conversation that we were having earlier on, and maybe not for the Czechia game, and I'm not suggesting Dawson Devoy comes in for that, but I definitely think with the games going forward, whether we qualify or not, you're looking at summer internationals, friendlies, whatever the case may be. I do think he should come into the reckoning because of the lack of options that we have. It's only natural that he comes into the reckoning, I feel, because we're just not blessed in that area of the pitch. And this is a prime example. You have Cullen out, and we're all scratching our head as to who's going to play.
Yeah, and obviously it is a one-off game in Prague as well, which is an interesting tactical conundrum. But in terms of Devoy, I get the sense from both of you don't feel that he's going to be out of place whatsoever if he does get called up at some stage, and more than likely it would be after the World Cup qualifiers.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be for this game, but as Alan said, we have some Nations League games coming up after that. We have some summer friendlies. Give him a shot. Like, what's the worst thing that can happen? Like, we all know that he has a technical ability. We can see his game is after maturing. Physically, he's after maturing as well. So give him a chance. Like, I think everybody says it always takes for a player to go to England or go to Scotland. Like, big thing with Johnny Kenny, Liam Scales. Liam Scales for me was the big one where I couldn't believe that he was never getting an opportunity to go into the national team. He goes and signs for Celtic, and then he's in the national team. Do you know what I mean? So I think it happens quite frequently. It'd be great for a manager to have the guts to actually go and bring a player in and say, no, I don't care if he's playing the League of Ireland. I don't care who he is, don't care where he's playing. Give him the opportunity, and I'll take the heat for it if it doesn't work.
See, I suppose to explain it really, Raf, for me is we would have always been viewed as kind of the league isn't up to standard, isn't up to scratch. And if there was an outstanding player, and we've had them down through the years, even going back to my time, Glenn Crowe banging in goals, but never viewed. Now, going back then, we had brilliant strikers or whatever. But as the years have progressed and the standard of the national team has kind of dipped, and all of a sudden you have the league on a bit of an upsurge. So you have the likes of Graham Burke was called up, Jack Byrne, and these are serious players. But I think, again, probably the league not getting the recognition that it deserves. And I totally understand that in terms of people say, oh, well, the lads in the Championship or League One or wherever playing at a higher level. I get that to a point, right? But what I'm saying about this one is basically, while the league is on an upsurge, and if you have, and this is the key thing for me, if you have the likes of Shamrock Rovers, who we've seen now consistently doing very well in Europe, getting to a group stage a couple of times back to back, you have Shelbourne the same, getting there this year, getting to a group stage. If they can kick on again and do something similar this year, you have Bohemians in Europe. If we can get to a stage where we're obviously trying to grow an industry, as we all understand that, grow the infrastructure, facilities, but we also need to get to a stage where we have lads playing in the league who are playing at a serious level, whether it be Europa League, Conference League, that should come into the conversation, that a manager should be able to look at them, a senior team manager, the likes of a Josh Honohan last year, and not feel as though, oh, it's a token gesture, give him a shot. Look at him and judge him on the fact that he's playing at a really serious level and say, this lad is capable of stepping into that squad and won't look out of place. And I feel right now at this moment in time, and I've watched Dawson Devoy over and over for the last 18 months, he should be very much in the reckoning and in the conversation. Not to play in the first 11, no, I'm not saying that, but very much in the reckoning and the conversation to be named in a squad, or at least in the debate, because I said we're not blessed in that area, but I think that's where we need to get to as a league. And I would love to think the likes of Heimir Hallgrimsson, who has seen it at a similar kind of level with the likes of Iceland or whatever, and we covered Bodo Glimt on the Champions League last year or last week, and you have the likes of Jens Petter Hauge, players like this that are playing in their domestic league and eventually getting called into a national team. That's where we need to get to as a league. And as I said, Dawson Devoy wouldn't look out of place whatsoever in our national team squad.
Yeah, now you mentioned the Champions League, so just in one word, because I know we're just wrapping up here. I suppose the draw was done for the remainder of the knockout stages on Friday, and the pathways.
Brilliant draw.
Yeah, the pathways look very interesting. One side looks a lot stronger than the other. So in one word, Richie, your tip to win the Champions League this season based on the
Just one
pathway.
word.
Well,
what if the team is a double barrel?
Yeah, Bayern Munich.
That's my one.
Yeah, I think Bayern Munich. I just think purely because of Harry Kane's goals, I think Arsenal could be up there with their defence, and Arteta with the way his...
He said a word, that's 14.
No, sorry, I'll go. Yeah, I think Harry Kane. Go on, Harry Kane, Bayern Munich.
Okay, and in 1, 2 or 3 words, because Paris Saint-Germain actually is 3 words, like, well, sort of.
I wasn't naming them.
No, I know you weren't, but who are you going for based on the draw?
I didn't know Richie was going to say Bayern Munich, but they would be my fancy right now because, again, Kane, love Kane, and they're going really well domestically. Beat Borussia Dortmund at the weekend as well. But I think, judging on the draw, Arsenal have an unbelievable chance. because you would fancy them to get through Leverkusen, then to play the winner of Bodo Glimt in Lisbon.
No, there's one of them in the quarters.
All of a sudden you're in the semi-final. So they have a great opportunity, but Bayern Munich is my tip.
All right, fair play. So that's unanimity right there. Now, we're going to be back next Monday, but remember, this week we've 2 episodes for the price of one, which of course is free on any social channel that you're looking for, on any podcast platform as well. But Alan Cawley and Richie Towell, thanks for coming in, and we'll be back next week.